Let's talk about energy and the carbon cycle. Energy comes in from the sun and it gets used by living things. A lot of sunlight hits the earth every day. Some is reflected into space, and some of that energy is absorbed as heat by the atmosphere and the earth, but a small portion of it hits plants. Of that, 34% is actually absorbed. Photosynthesis is not very efficient, and a small portion of that 34% becomes available to make sugars. A lot of those sugars are then used to do the things the plant needs to do to stay alive and grow, but a small portion of them are stored, and if the plant is eaten by another organism, some of those sugars could then be available to them for the energy they need to survive. The generally accepted amount of the plant's energy available to the organism that eats the plant is 10%. It's important to remember that 10% is a ballpark estimate. Sometimes it's a little more and sometimes a little less. That means about 90% is lost. Lost as heat, used, or lost in inefficiency. If we were talking about money, that would mean only 10 cents in every dollar is useful to the next organism. Of that 10 cents, only 1 cent would be available for use by the organism that eats the plant. 2,000 kilocalories of sugar in bananas, that's 200 for the animal that eats them and 20 for the next in the chain. When sunlight hits the atmosphere, some is reflected back, but some is absorbed, and that energy becomes heat. The composition of the atmosphere is important in that process. Some gases aren't hugely affected by the heat energy from the sun, but others are. Those gases that hold the heat well are called greenhouse gases. The EPA gives greenhouse gases a number called the global warming potential. This number reflects the potential of different gases to change the climate. CO2 has a GWP of 1. There's a lot of it and it sticks around for a long time, but it's not as good at holding heat as some other gases. Methane has a GWP of around 28 and nitrous oxide 265. These numbers reflect the dangers these gases pose, but remember, there is a lot more CO2 emitted due to burning fossil fuels than there is nitrous oxide. 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions are CO2, and we are emitting more and more of it every year. The National Oceanic Administration predicts that $106 billion worth of property will be underwater by 2050 as the temperatures and sea levels rise. The changes we've made to the carbon cycle are affecting energy and other cycles. Ultimately, Earth is one big, delicate ecosystem. Stay awesome!